Welcome life science learners to another installment. In our lesson today, we're going to be focusing on response of plants to the environment. What's important is that we need to understand that like us as humans, we're able to respond to the environment. Plants also have the ability to be able to respond to the environment. In our lesson today, we will be focusing on plant hormones, movement of plants towards different stimuli, which is called tropism, as well as the defense mechanisms that plants have that allow them to successfully survive in their different environments. So let's have a look at the concepts in our lessons and we'll get straight into the details. It's important that we go through a list of terms and we'll try and unpack that in our first bit of this segment, and then we're going to spend some time looking at plant hormones. Let's get straight into the important terms that we need to identify. So I'm going to introduce these for you so that you have a sense of what these are, and when we use them later on, I'll talk more specifically about them. So the concept of tropism. Tropism essentially means to turn, and occurs when an external stimuli affects the direction in which a plant grows and develops. So if we talk of tropism, it is basically a plant turning towards a stimulus. And there are various different stimuli that are present in the environment, from the availability of water, light, gravity. So these are all stimuli that plants respond to. So they're quite sensitive towards different stimuli in the environment, so we'll have to look at that as well. We're going to look at hormones, and one specific hormone we're looking at are called auxins, and these are plant growth hormones that stimulate the elongation and cell differentiation. So if we talk about the growth of a plant and its increase in height, both vertically up and into the ground, that's because of hormones called auxins. Another set of hormones that we're going to look at are called gibberellins, and it's important that we recognize this term. Gibberellins are plant hormones that actually cause the elongation of the nodes and internodes of the stems, the development of flowers, the sprouting of buds, and the germination of seeds. So this is quite a complex hormone that has a significant role in the growth of the nodes, the development of seeds, as well as the formation of fruit and flower. So we'll spend some time looking at that. Another hormone called Abscisic Acid, okay, and this is a hormone that inhibits the growth of apical buds, seeds, and roots in plants. So it's derived, if you think of the word abscess, so it plays an important role in a process of actually stopping certain things from developing. It also plays an important role in the maturation and the ripening of fruit and the release of leaves and fruit from the tree. Phototropism, and this is the growth and movement of a plant towards a stimulus of light. We also know that there is a gravity stimuli that plants respond to, and that's called geotropism, and this is the growth and movement of a plant in response to the force of gravity. And then finally, we know that plants also respond to water, and that's called hydrotropism, and this is the movement of a plant towards the source of water. One final slide of terminology would be your chemotropism. So plants also respond to chemical stimuli in the environment, where they move towards a specific hormone or stimulus. We also see a unique adaptation of plants where they move towards objects, and that's called thigmotropism. It's also called stereotropism, and this is essentially where we see certain plants that creep and move towards a solid surface. And that ability of a touch receptor is the ability of plants to grow towards a solid object. So we see this in amongst your creepers. We also see this among plants and how they gather together and grow together. And so that's again a stimulus that is because of solid objects that they come in contact with. And then the concept of abscission, which is when we see leaves falling off a plant or we see the fruits falling and breaking off, that's because of abscission. And so, in fact, I have a fruit here with me today, and I mean, this is a mango, and it's obviously ripe now, and this would have obviously fallen off from a tree if it was not plucked by the farmer. But what's important to us, for us to recognize, is that there are points on a plant like this in terms of the fruit falling off the tree naturally, and that's because there's a hormone called abscisic acid that causes this to actually break off and fall when the fruit is ripe. So if you've ever noticed, if you've tried to pluck off a fruit from a tree, when it's green and not yet ripe, you might struggle to break that off. However, when the fruit's ripe and you have this ready fruit to be consumed, you'll find that a simple twist allows for that fruit to break off. And that's because of a hormone called abscisic acid that causes an abscess to develop for leaves and fruits to fall off. Okay, so let's get straight into understanding what is it that stimulates growth in plant. We know that plants are stimulated to grow external in terms of towards an external stimulus. So we looked at light, water, gravity, space, but there's also an internal stimulus that plants receive, and that internal stimulus we refer to as hormones. Just as humans have hormones that are carried through our arteries and veins that go to specific parts in our body, plants also have hormones that target specific areas and have a certain effect. So we will look at those hormones in a bit. So the plant hormones are essentially organic compounds produced by the plant that occur in low concentrations and act as chemical messengers. So they have a specific function to carry out. Hormones are normally synthesized in one part of the plant, and then they're transported to the other parts where they can cause a response such as the growth or the ripening of fruit or in this specific tissue. So folks, there are three main groups of plant hormones that we need to look at. The first group are the auxins, the second are the gibberellins, the third, abscisic acid. In addition to these three, there are two that we're going to extend ourselves and look at, which are called ethylene and your cytokinins. Let's have a look at the auxins. The auxins are a group of plant hormones that are mainly produced in the apical meristem. So what do we mean by the apical parts? So think of the meristematic tissue at the tips of the plant, so along your tip of your stem, as well as right at the bottom of the roots. So plants typically increase in height, growing both vertically upwards as well as into the ground. So at these ends, you'll find that there's meristematic tissue. And so your apical meristem is the elongation of the plants due to the auxins in those areas. We also have indole acetic acid. An abbreviation for that is IAA. This is the most common natural auxin occurring in plants. You'll find that the auxins tend to move downwards in the phloem from the growing tip of the stems to the cells in the lower parts of the plant. So if we were to illustrate the tip of the stem, and this was the cells that are constantly dividing, and refer to that the meristematic tissue, you'll find that the cells in these areas, you'll find that the auxins are produced, and this tends to grow in the opposite direction from the stimulus, which is light. So we have light that targets the apical parts, and we find that the auxins are produced below the apical areas, and these auxins tend to move away, causing the elongation of cells and the development of more cells in this area. And this further increases the length or the height of the plant. Small amounts of these auxins also are produced in the growing tips of the roots, as I mentioned, and so we'll find that in the root tips, we find that the root tips typically grow this way, and you'll find that at this area you've got the meristematic tissue, and the auxins are found in these areas here, which tend to move away from the stimulus of gravity, and you'll find that the elongation happens in this area here, causing the cells to grow in length vertically into the ground. However, it's important that we understand that the highest concentration of auxins are found in the growing tips of stems, and that is where maximum growth and increase of height occurs. Auxins are important in stimulating cell division, as well as the formation of roots in cuttings. You'll find that the development of flowers also occurs due to auxins. Abscission, which is the breaking off of leaves, also auxins play an important role in that, as well as it causes the tropism in plants and the roots in the stems. The last set of hormones, or rather the second set we're looking at, are called gibberellins, and these are the largest groups of hormones that are mainly produced in the terminal buds of the stems and roots, as well as in the young leaves and in the embryo in the seed. The functions of these gibberellins are to increase the elongation along the internodes of the stem. It stimulates the root growth as well as the development of flowers and new buds. It's also important in the germination of seeds. And as I said, finally, the hormone that we're looking at in this segment is abscisic acid. And abscisic acid basically is an inhibitor of growth, and this counteracts the function of auxins. And it plays an important role in helping a plant cope with stressful conditions. It is produced in the leaves, stems, and unripe fruit. And so as we wrap up this section, I'd like to show you kind of when we look at fruit and when they mature, you'll find that, as I mentioned earlier on, in this typical fruit, you've got abscisic acid being produced there. You've got abscisic acid being produced at this end, which causes the fruit to ripen as well as fall off the plant. And that's important in the seed in this fruit landing onto the ground and then germinating into a new plant. So as we wrap this section up, having looked at the different hormones and their functions, wish you guys a short break, and I'll see you back in a little while.